Hi, John Leroux here from the Beaverbrook Art Gallery, and you can see from the dramatic view behind me that we're in a pretty unique spot. We're down towards the center of the earth, or at least in the deepest spot around the gallery. We're in the sunken sculpture courtyard. But the reason I'm here, and you can see this dramatic view behind me, which almost looks like the outline of the Great Pyramids in Egypt, it's because I want to talk to you about a really dramatic work that we have in our collection, and it's one of the more popular pieces that we have, and we put it on permanent display over the last 2 years, and since that time it's become almost one of our more popular works, certainly among kids and a lot of people that maybe don't often come into the Beaverbrook Art Gallery. And that's for a few reasons, because it was done by one of the most famous American artists of all time, and it was a depiction of one of the most famous Canadians of all time. And that is, it is a work by Andy Warhol, where he did a portrait of, that's right, with his Joe helmet on the ice, Wayne Gretzky. It was no secret that Wayne Gretzky is one of the greatest hockey players of all time, possibly even the greatest. That's why they called him the Great One, is his nickname. And like him, Andy Warhol is one of the greatest American artists of all time, and certainly one of the most infamous. He was a radical innovator. He helped create a language in art called pop art, which really changed the face of the world and how we see art and popular culture and products. He was enamored by fame. He loved being around famous people. And it's interesting because he was also quite a shy person and sort of stuck back a little bit from the limelight, but he always wanted to be at the periphery of the center of attention. He was also fascinated by commercial products and graphics and advertising. That's why he got famous doing his Campbell soup can in the early 1960s. But at the beginning of his career, he first received fame and notoriety as an illustrator. He was trained as an artist and graphic designer. And he did a series of illustrations for magazine articles, hand-drawn. He had a tremendous hand and talent. Warhol did a great series of record covers, actually, for a jazz label called Blue Note in the 1950s. He even signed them at the bottom as if they were works of art, which, in a sense, they really are. For graphics, they were done in a very 1950s style, very loose and gestural, with a really wet, watery watercolor and ink sense. So they really breathe this idea of jazz. And that led into his 1960s silkscreen works of movie stars and rock icons like Marilyn Monroe or Elvis Presley. And he's also started to do political figures later on, like Mao Zedong. And I mentioned he was enamored by the idea of fame and celebrity. One of his most well-known quotes is that in the future, everybody will be world famous for 15 minutes. So not only that people will be famous, but the idea that we as a population are really chasing fame at the moment. So he also did a series of album covers for musicians like the Velvet Underground, Rolling Stones, and he started to do as well in the late 1970s a series of silk screens of athletes, well-known athletes, people who are at the top of the game around the world. And he had a series called the Athlete Series in 1977. And he picked a single athlete from different sports, people like Pele in soccer, Muhammad Ali in boxing, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in basketball, Chris Evert in tennis. And one of these was actually a hockey player, a player named Rod Gilbert, who was a superstar, Hall of Famer actually, with the New York Rangers. He was on the Canada 72 Summit Series team. And so he was a Rangers fan. Funny enough, Warhol would go to Rangers games. He really enjoyed the Rangers. And so when the chance came to do another hockey player several years later in the early 80s, he jumped on it. He was a hockey fan. And so he ended up doing Wayne Gretzky in 1983. So why Wayne Gretzky? How did this come about? Well, in Vancouver, there was a commercial gallery owner named Franz Winans, and times were tough in the early 1980s because of the recession. People weren't buying art like they were a few years ago. And he knew he needed something to freshen up his business and get people excited. And at the time, you could actually hire Warhol as sort of a commercial hired gun to paint someone. You could hire him for about $35,000 American to paint the person of your choice. And so Winans hired Warhol for 35 grand to do a series of portraits of Wayne Gretzky, a series of silk screens and 6 paintings. And he did. So arrangements were made for Gretzky to go to Warhol's studio next time he was in New York. And we have still the Polaroids from that session. It was Warhol loved his Polaroid camera because back in the early 80s, it was the only way you could get instant photographs, unlike today's iPhones, which we just take for granted of snapping everything and having it instantly to look at. So with the Polaroids, you can see that there's a very young, boyish Wayne Gretzky with his, with his feathered 80s hair, almost kind of in a bit of a mullet. And he's quite thin. He's wearing his Oilers jersey, and you can tell, especially from the one of the face, that is the exact design and drawing that is used in the final Warhol silkscreen. And there's some other ones as well where he's clutching a hockey stick and his arms sort of bent. And Warhol borrowed a few of those to help build the body, so it's made up of a few multiple of these photographs. But what's interesting is that the coloration, the color choices made for the final silkscreen, very 80s, is very kind of aquas and peaches, this Miami Vice sort of color palette. But they were also similar to the Oilers jersey, which was blue and orange as well. So Gretzky said that he really took that to heart as well, and why he liked it. And I want to play for you now. There's actually a CBC interview from 1983 once this artwork was launched, and it's a young Wayne Gretzky talking about how much he liked the work in Warhol. And I just want to play it for you because it gives a real sense of the time.
The plan to put the famous painter and the famous player together was the brainstorm of a Vancouver art dealer. Gretzky, who gets to keep the portrait, was all in favor of it. Warhol is one of his favorite artists.
I have a few of Andy Warhol's paintings of my own that I've collected over the years, and I'm by no means saying that I know a whole lot about art. I buy things that I enjoy, and I enjoy his stuff, and to be painted by him is terrific.
What are you going to do with the painting that you got?
Well, I'm going to keep my painting, hang it in my living room, and show it off to everybody that comes into my house.
Gretzky not only knows what he likes, but he knows why. When he had to choose which of the 6 nearly identical portraits he wanted to keep, he used a method familiar to sports fans everywhere. Gretzky picked the painting that had his home colors in the background.
The other colors, if you can see the blue with the orange and white, and that's basically how they all look the same, but the color in that one was the one that I seem to like the most.
One of the beauties of the medium of silkscreen is that you can actually do different colorations and get totally different effects using the exact same screens, but just using different colored inks. And Warhol did that with a lot of the Wayne Gretzky works. You can see there's small variations with different coloration, although the largest edition he did of 300 was of the kind that the Beaverbrook has. It's mostly the deeper blue with the white and the orange square. But you can see that there's big interest in getting the varieties in collections and exhibitions together. They're often being shown across Canada these days with huge interest in Warhol and of course in Gretzky as well. When you look at the bottom of our work, it's signed by Warhol as you'd expect. But this is one of the few cases where the model also signed it. Wayne Gretzky signed these as well. And you can see the Wayne Gretzky signature in pencil, Wayne Gretzky 99 in the lower right-hand corner. And the Canadian singer-songwriter Hawksley Workman, who played at the Beaverbrook last year, he actually has a song on one of his recent albums called Warhol's Portrait of Gretzky, and it's about, guess what? Yep, you got it, this Portrait of Wayne Gretzky by Andy Warhol. And the chorus is drops a few maybe PG-13 words, so be careful about listening to it, but it's a great song. And when he gave the concert, he actually hadn't planned on playing it at the Beaverbrook when he played here, but then he realized it was just down the hall from him, and so he played it as one of his encores and then tweeted a photo of him standing next to it here in our hallways. So there you have it, one of the more fascinating works in our collection by one of the most fascinating artists in history, and it's also something that's definitely of its time, of the early 1980s, but it's still very contemporary today and interesting. And so come and see Wayne Gretzky by Andy Warhol next time you come to the Beaverbrook.